Not everything that historians and archaeologists discover pleases them. Sometimes they come across artifacts or other pieces of evidence that challenge our current understanding of history, and not always in a good way. For better or worse, those new facts have to be accepted as they are, even if they change the way we think about our own history. Here in this video, we're going to look at the most controversial discoveries in American history. An out-of-place artifact is one that appears to have no business being in the place where it was found, like finding a modern wristwatch in an ancient Egyptian tomb, for example. For many people, the stone egg of Lake Winnipesaukee is one such out-of-place artifact. The egg was found by construction workers as they dug a hole for a fence post close to Lake Winnipesaukee in New England in 1872 at a depth of 6 feet. It's been studied by experts and historians for more than 100 years since then, but we're still no closer to completely understanding it than we were the day it came out of the ground. The type of rock used to carve the egg isn't from the New Hampshire area, and the markings on it are inconsistent with anything else that's ever been found in the USA. The symbols are probably tribal, but no Native American tribe recognizes them. The quality of the stonework is impressive. The egg is drilled almost all the way through and polished to a shine, despite being made from granite. While some have written it off as a hoax, others believe that it's evidence of an advanced civilization of stoneworkers living in America centuries ago. While we're talking about ancient and unknown civilizations in America, we should talk about the petroglyphs at Winnemucca Lake in Nixon, Nevada. There, in the dry bed of what was once a lake, you'll find the oldest petroglyphs in the whole country. Carbon dating had to be carried out to reveal the last time the level of the lake had been low enough to allow someone to make these carvings. And the answer came back as about 14,800 years. In American terms, that's almost prehistoric. Some of the etched symbols are little more than lines, crosses, or swirling patterns, but there are also some more advanced representations of flowers and trees. The question of how significant they were to the people who made them is unresolved, but so is the question of who those people were. As with the Lake Winnipesaukee egg, Native American tribes have examined the symbols and confirmed that they're unknown to them. They are twice as old as any other rock carvings that have been found in America so far, and as such, they're something of a historic anomaly. As we're all told in school, Christopher Columbus discovered America. Unfortunately for you, us, and the education system, that's a lie. There were already people living in America when Columbus arrived, and even if we're talking about the first foreign visitors to the country, Columbus wasn't among them. Columbus opened the door to English and Spanish colonization of America after his accidental arrival there in 1492, but the first people on the land probably arrived from Asia 15,000 years ago by crossing the Bering Land Bridge. Back then, the strip of land connected Alaska directly to Siberia, so people could walk from one to the other. If you'd prefer to focus on the first European arrivals on North American land, that honor would go to the Vikings, who arrived at Newfoundland in Canada some 5 centuries before Columbus. They set up a small town, the remains of which can still be seen today. There's even some evidence that the Chinese colonized parts of South America in the early 15th century, a few decades before Columbus showed up. Columbus was far from being the first, he just had the biggest impact after he arrived. The existence of the jug known as the fuente magna is such a thorny subject that some historians are still trying to find a way to prove that it's a fake, more than half a century after it was discovered in Pumapunque, Bolivia in 1950. It's not so much the jug that's significant, but the script that decorates the sides of it. To many people, including noted expert Dr. Clyde Winters, the writing is a form of cuneiform and can be directly compared to early forms of both Sumerian and Semitic cuneiform. He's been able to point to especially apparent similarities between the Sumerian cuneiform and the cuneiform on the Fuente Magna, and that presents a substantial historical problem. The ancient Sumerians came from the part of the world that we now call the Middle East. mostly from Iraq. There ought to be no way whatsoever that their language could have spread as far as Peru. If they did, it means that the Sumerians were an incredibly advanced seafaring race and that they too ought to be considered among the first foreign people to arrive in the Americas. Some discoveries seem too implausible to be true, and yet when they happen, we have to give them our full consideration. Take, for example, the discovery of a carved bell inside a seam of 300 million year old coal by a 10-year-old boy called Newton Anderson in 1944. The bell, which was found in Upshur County, West Virginia, is made of brass and came complete with an iron clapper. It was, however, firmly embedded in coal that formed during the Carboniferous period on Earth. To some fundamentalist Christians, this is evidence that the bell is a so-called antediluvian artifact created in the times before the biblical flood described in Genesis. Their assessment is backed up by the Institute for Creation Research, which had the bell examined at the University of Oklahoma. If they're to be believed, analysis of the bell revealed that it was made of a strange blend of metals that are inconsistent with any modern age design. For what it's worth, Newton Anderson took a polygraph test as an adult, the results of which suggest that he was telling the truth about the bell and the way it was found. I think we can safely assume that the Institute for Creation Research may be a little biased, but it's still a fascinating artifact. The Nampa figurine wasn't found inside a 300 million year old coal seam, but it's no easier to explain. The bizarre tiny figure, which looks almost like a doll, was discovered during the digging of a well in the southwest of Idaho in 1889. At a depth of nearly 300 feet, the drill began to spit out pieces of clay, one of which was a damaged figurine. While it's possible that this shape was created by the drill, it seems spectacularly unlikely. That leads us to ask who could have made it, and how did it come to be 300 feet below the ground at such a depth that the Earth ought not to have been touched there for the last 2 million years? To add to the conundrum, the top layer of the ground it was found within has been sealed under a basalt layer caused by volcanic activity thousands of years earlier. To put that in its most basic terms, it means there's no chance that the figure got there by accident. Extremely early humans did exist 2 million years ago, but as far as we know, they were confined to Africa. Perhaps we should consider that they might have been in Idaho too. Let's add the ancient Romans to the list of people who might have visited the Americas in ancient times. And in support of that theory, we present the existence of the Tekaxic Calixtlahuaca head. The weathered head sculpture was buried in Mexico somewhere around the year 1470, probably just before Columbus arrived in the Americas, as part of a grave. All the other goods that were found inside the tomb were typical for the era and the type of burial. But this head is not. In fact, the only thing this head could be compared to is the kind of sculpture style that was once popular in ancient Rome. Even the face on the sculpture appears to be more European in style than Native American. The head was found by archaeologist Jose Garcia Payon in 1933 beneath a pyramid, but it shocked him so much that he didn't reveal it to the wider world until 1960. In 2001, Romeo H. Hristov of the University of New Mexico confirmed that the head is definitely Roman and was probably made during the 2nd century. That begs the question of how it came to be in Mexico in pre-Columbian times. Did the Vikings bring it here as a souvenir, or were the Romans once here too? Scientists and historians will often direct bile at anything that doesn't fit their preferred narrative, and the Davenport tablets get more bile than the most problematic artifacts. These stone slates were discovered inside mounds in Davenport, Iowa in early 1877 by Reverend Jacob Gass. To their detractors, they're forgeries, either created by the Reverend or left there for him to find, made from slate tiles stolen from a roof. To their supporters, they're the American equivalent of the Rosetta Stone. The fact that Gass, as an amateur archaeologist, was occasionally known to trade in fake Native American pipes doesn't help those who believe in the authenticity of the tablets to win the argument. What the detractors can't explain, though, is the fact that one of the tablets contains a carving that represents the ancient Egyptian opening of the mouth ceremony. On the other side of the same tablet, there are examples of Egyptian writing and a representation of Egyptian-style obelisks. This is yet another example of images of life abroad turning up in America long before they ought to. When you blow open a cave in a mountain, anything might turn up. 2 gold prospectors found that out to their great surprise in June 1934 when they blasted open the rocks of the San Pedro Mountains of Wyoming and found themselves inside a small cavern. They weren't alone in there. There was a small, mummified set of human remains, and they looked nothing like any human either of the men had ever seen. Now known as the San Pedro Mountains mummy, this unique specimen might be a validation of the Native American tales of little people who used to live in the mountains. According to Native American traditions, there were impish people with great healing powers. The mummified skeleton was barely over 6 feet tall, but clearly genuine. X-rays carried out in later years revealed that there was raw meat in the stomach of the corpse and that he was an adult male with a severe birth deformity who died somewhere around the year 1700. The deformity explanation doesn't sit well with everyone, though, and they prefer to believe the little person story. To compound the mystery, the corpse was lost during the 1980s and is still missing today. The Mayan calendar isn't so much a single artifact as a concept, but it's still one that holds plenty of fascination today. Not least because many people believe that it predicts the end of the world. Although the existence of the Mayan calendar has been known about and understood for decades, it first became internationally famous in the 21st century because it appeared to predict the end of the world in 2012. As we all know, 2012 came and went without incident, but some people now claim that we've missed the date and the world will actually end in 2020. That feels more and more likely with each and every passing day. The calculation system we know as the Mayan calendar dates back 2,500 years and is actually mislabeled. Various cultures that existed before the Maya used the same system of monitoring the stars and measuring time, although the Mayans refined and added to it. Those who have a particular affection for the calendar believe that it's already made a series of successful predictions of the future and therefore demonstrates that the ancient occupants of the Americas were clairvoyant, although the accuracy of those predictions is wide open to interpretation. In recent years, we've seen an increase in the number of people who believe that a race of giant humans occupied the Earth either before or at the same time as ancient humans. We've even seen the Smithsonian accused of hiding evidence of the existence of these giants. In this case, perhaps the conspiracy theorists have a point. How else could anyone explain the size of this footprint, which was found in the Paluxy River close to Glen Rose in Texas? The imprint is almost 2 feet long and is wider than any human foot we've ever seen. Scientists have made calculations based on the size of the footprint, and from those calculations, they've concluded that the person who made the imprint must have been almost 10 feet tall. That sounds like a giant to us. The experts haven't even tried to explain away this artifact. Instead, they just try to tell us that it isn't a footprint at all, and the fact that it looks like a footprint is just a coincidence. That is extremely difficult to believe. Here's a challenge to history that stares you straight in the face, literally. During the 1950s, a colossal stone head was found in the jungle of Guatemala. There's no mistaking the features on the head's face. They're Caucasian in nature and don't resemble any of the pre-Hispanic races who lived in Central America during the times of antiquity. Stone faces like this are known to have been made by the Olmecs 3,000 years ago. They've made other stone heads in the area, and they positioned the faces of those heads to face the sky in the same way that this one does. None of the other faces have features like this, though. For the Olmec to have made this, they must also presumably have seen a Caucasian person, and that suggests a Caucasian presence in this part of America at a time before Christians believed Jesus walked the earth. Much of the statue was sadly destroyed during an armed conflict in the region around 10 years after the first photo was taken, and so further examination of it is sadly impossible. Our inability to see it with our own eyes today makes it easy for a lot of people to dismiss it entirely. But the original photograph tells no lies. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.